Good evening, and welcome to our Advent evening of reflection. So that you can participate fully, we invite you to download the program from the parish website. We have set aside this time during Advent to reflect on Psalms, which we hear proclaimed during the season. Tonight, we welcome author and parishioner Maureen O'Brien, who will share from her book, What Was Lost? Seeking Refuge in the Psalms. Maureen will explore the Advent theme of movement from darkness to light through stories from her own life and her own spiritual journey. Joining Maureen are Gabriel Luffall and Zachary Gilbert, who will provide musical settings for the different Psalms. And we are grateful for Madison Marin making our live streaming possible this evening. So welcome to everyone, and welcome Maureen O'Brien.
Hi, thanks you guys for coming out. I want to welcome people who are part of the parish, people who are visiting, and of course, people who are watching on live stream. Welcome to everybody. When I first discovered the Psalms, it was during a really hard time, and they have not failed me in the almost decade that I've been studying them and reading them and turning to them in good times and in bad. So I'm going to share with you tonight excerpts from my book that are reflections on how the Psalms went deep within and helped sustain me and nourish me. Ruby. Sometimes, emptied of faith, a spiritual numbness overcomes me. The disconnection feels awful, but I understand it's a part of the seeking process to not want to try anymore, to think maybe I've been a stupid Pollyanna after all. Maybe the atheists are right, wanting to give up on this possibility of God, when hope seems not just hidden, but permanently eclipsed. This happened last September. My cynicism and doubt covered me. So in spite of the boulder-like coldness in my soul, I took concrete action and forced myself to drive over the mountain and attend 10 o'clock Mass. Because, quite frankly, I cannot bear to live in this world without God. I don't know how anyone does that. On the way into St. Patrick's St. Anthony, I asked that God just show me one sign, one thing to hang on to. I found my usual place, the same pew by one of the pillars. I opened my missalette to the readings of that Sunday. I most frequently attend 5 o'clock Mass, when the sun comes through the stories told in the stained glass windows on the church on the western side. That morning, the eastern angle of the sun pierced the stained glass, and a pink circle of light landed upon my open pages. When I looked up to see the source, a ruby ball was so bright it hurt, and I actually had the thought, it might be dangerous to my retinas to look right at the hot spot of the sun in Jesus' robes. When I had entered that church for the very first time, I was instantly transformed by the magic. Not a single window was clear. Every single arched shape told a familiar story. Boats and stormy waves, a woman at a well, lambs. I felt as if I was in a cathedral-sized, stained glass shell. There's nothing like that ruby red. It fluttered that day when it landed, pink, a rose, a peony, a flicker. I believe in asking, and if all I can do is ask for one thing, I do that. If I can receive it, it ripples out and the grace widens. In that autumnal light, I noticed the brown boy sitting next to me. He had 3 crucifixes on his arms and the most incredible eyelashes. They were long and feathery, just absolutely bird-like. I tried not to stare, but their shape was exquisite. When the collection basket was headed our way, he pulled out his wallet. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched him press it open. It was empty. He had no money to give. He leaned forward and slid the wallet back into his pocket. I wanted to cry, not because he had no money, but because I felt I was in the same boat with this stranger next to me when I remembered my favorite Christmas song, In the Bleak Midwinter, with lyrics by the poet Christina Rossetti. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet, what can I give him? Give him my heart.
angels and archangels may have gathered there. Cherubim and seraphim thronged the air. But his mother only in her maiden place worshipped the beloved with a kiss. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what I can, I give him. Give my heart.
Refuge. I wake up to begin writing, and in the dim winter light, I see where my eye is drawn when I open my broken Bible to the Psalms. Refuge. Refuge appears over and over. What exactly is refuge? It's vastly different than shelter. Refuge is deeper, scarier. The stakes are higher when you need refuge. Shelter is from temperatures dropping and the chance of rain. You can probably make it through without shelter. But without refuge, you're vulnerable and truly alone. Refuge is wind blowing the cedars as far as they will bend, thunder that jolts you, and an absolutely black night that has suddenly fallen. And you're running toward home. The need for it is deeper in the body. When you find shelter, you can calmly peer out, but the need for refuge makes you look within. I could never add up the number of hours I've spent alone, staring out the window at that void. Those are the deepest, darkest, loneliest hours. I feel that darkness filling me, as if I am a part of it. In you, Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Psalm 31. When I remember to say a prayer, it comes as a cluster of stars on the periphery, and I'm not quite sure I ever even saw any green sparkle, but I try again. A Hail Mary, Jesus, please. I can't even call that relief embers, because embers stay a while. When I cannot sleep because I am reliving some conflict I endured that day, one I feel I cannot undo, when I'm imagining some future event which I fear is going to flood me with more heartache and sink me, and God at last finds me in the dark, I fall asleep, and when I wake up, I don't know at what point I finally let that refuge enclose me. The Psalms are all about the contrasts in our lives. Like a riveting black and white photo, there's gradations, vivid cool to dramatic warm to dramatic cool. Refuge honors the challenge of the silver tone moments turning to noir. The Highway at Night. This really should be like a love poem for Route 84, I think, but The Highway at Night. There's nothing like the beauty of familiar melodies, a saxophone filling my car as I see I am still an hour from home. The street lights, the overhead beams, especially bright along the exits, suggest a metaphor to me. I glide into the edge of the circle of light, enter the whitest, pearliest part as it illuminates my hands on the steering wheel, then drive out of it with only my headlights slicing through the night. Again, I am in the shadows with darkness all around me. This metaphor of flickering in light and dark as I try to return home is why I turn to the Psalms. The contrasts of life, especially when I am tired, and I am often tired, overwhelm me. Not just my own suffering and healing, but the sorrow and joys of those I love so much. The I in the Psalms pours out with exposed honesty, a human struggling to find God within the world. This voice speaks for me, not because I can't speak for myself, but because sometimes my emotional vocabulary is limited. The I is a phenomenal poet articulating deep despair and sweeping faith, giving me all the words I need to keep driving, switching lanes through the night. This is from a section called Father, where I was trying to understand King David. King David wrote about half of the Psalms. There's 150 Psalms. He wrote half of them, and I just love his work so much. So this is me trying to understand especially some of David's words. According to biblical history, David wrote Psalm 34 about the time he pretended to be stark, raving crazy, feigning madness in order to be set free of the danger of being murdered in 1 Samuel 21. The visuals of this story are incredibly alluring, including drooling in his beard. David's entire life was overloaded with cinematic possibilities. With this psalm in particular, I'm drawn to the depth of his thanksgiving, as he's grateful for God being there when he sunk down into the sorrow of his heart. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those whose spirit is crushed. We hear about a spirit being broken, but it's more agonizing to have it crushed underneath the tonnage of a tumultuous event, or a series of them, as many lives are, including David's. It's one thing to withstand this ourselves, but it's the hardest watching the suffering of those we love. If we believe that God is with our loved ones, not just with them, but even better, close to them, can we take deeper breaths through it all? Our children will suffer, but can we trust that God is there? In the language of 12-step recovery, this might be expressed as, she has her own higher power. This is often said to try to comfort parents when they realize their sheer, utter powerlessness over a terrifying addiction one of their children might be lost within. It can apply to cancer, racial evils, breakups, betrayals, sexual violence, bullying, failure. The list overflows. No matter how much you love your child, you'll come to a crossroads where you realize that your love can't block the blows falling upon them. David lived this. When his son was sick, he lay on the ground pleading with God for 7 days. But David's child died. So yes, this father knew crushed. I've written about my love of Mary as a mother, the way I wonder how she endured watching her son's body and spirit expire. She's gotten me through the hardest times witnessing children, my own children and my students, suffer. If I trust that something loving and holy is close to them, then what? I know they aren't walking through the valley of death all alone. I can envision my loved ones headed toward the tranquility of Psalm 23. I pray that God is close to them throughout every long, excruciating night, for every item currently being added to that aching list.
is the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord. I will bless the Lord at all times, with praise ever in my mouth. Let my soul glory in the Lord, who will hear the cry of the poor. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord. Let the lowly hear and be glad. The Lord listens to their pleas, and to hearts broken God is near. Who will hear the cry of the poor? The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord. Every spirit crushed God will save, will be ransom for their lives, will be safe shelter for their fears, and will hear the cry of the poor. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord. We proclaim your greatness, O God, your praise ever in our mouth. Every face brightened in your light, for you hear the cry of the poor. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Blessed be the Lord.
Tiny purses. When I was a very little girl, attending Mass every Sunday with my father and older sister, the dress code was very different than it is today. Admittedly, I find relief in the casual atmosphere now permitted at Mass. I'm loath to wear jeans and sneakers only because I was raised old school, But I do see that now people feel welcomed no matter their attire, and I feel that's the way church should be. Still, I love recalling the Easter mantillas I wore. Circles of patterned white lace, each one came with scalloped edges and a comb woven in so we could keep it snugly in place on top of our heads. Besides the mantillas, dresses with velvet sashes and white tights. We also wore white gloves and, to add to the accessories, carried purses. We had nothing to put in the purses, of course, except thin handkerchiefs dotted with violets, too fancy to ever actually use. I proudly held the handle of that purse and, bored during Mass, I recall playing with the brass clasp, turning it to open it, peering in, then clicking it shut. The memory of those vinyl purses I clutched when I was very small comes to me now as I age. The metaphor of the emptiness I carry still in my heart, along with the expectation, no, not an expectation, but hope. It's hope in doing the next right thing. I cry aloud to God. My hands are stretched out unceasingly. Psalm 77. Like undoing the clasp, opening the purse, and knowing something essential will come if you just believe the dark inner corners will be filled. When the branches catch it all. Since I've spent all of this time reading the Psalms, it seems there are more tender things in this world. Were they always here? If so, where was I? I've noticed that when I read the Psalms in the morning now, when I hear that soft sound of the pages turning, so tissue thin, that it's not just my fingertips, but even tinier. My fingerprints can flip them. Gentle, as in dove-like. I'm curious, how do all the words fit together? When I wake up, I begin my day by pulling back the curtains and thinking my favorite line, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad." Psalm 118. I have this day now. The snow fell last night when I was dreaming, just enough, airy enough, to cling to the trees on top, not fall beneath them, only land in a scallop beyond the wide arms of the branches. There's no white underneath, just the copper of the dead needles. I want a God like the softest of snowfalls, when the branches can catch it all. A God as tiny as the letter E at the end of a word, turning breath to breathe. One of my favorite Psalms is 119. It's a very strange psalm because it's repetitive over and over, but it's basically the idea of being guided, and it has the phrase, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light for my path." Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light for my path. So this chapter, Two Dusks, is about how I ended up in Italy the first time, and when I really first discovered St. Francis, not as just a concept or a statue or a prayer, but as a real feeling. The most succinct way I can summarize the next passage of my spiritual journey is, your word is a lamp for my feet, a light for my path. I've been to Italy twice now, traveling around by train. The first time with Lola, we met up in magical Florence, then delighted in the medieval hillside town of Cortona for Holy Week. Everyone I met, students, shopkeepers, strangers, kept asking me if I had been to La Cella, a hermitage where St. Francis had lived in 1211. You must go, they urged me. Lola had been there with Evan and loved it, telling me how sacred it felt. With a sign that read in English and Italian, "Stop in silence before God, rediscover who you are." No one had suggested that it was a stupid idea for a foreigner, a woman, to walk all by herself for an hour to a remote monastery. What about a woman with a broken inner compass? I began the journey at the edge of Cortona, near the church of Santa Margherita. What had Lola said? Take a left at the fork, then another left about a mile down, keep going. The wind gusted from the valley. I ambled around curves to the left, to the right. Was I headed the right way? I never knew. Soon the road descended into a hamlet with a few houses, shutters flung open, an inn, a restaurant with 2 men outside smoking and drinking. The road spilled into another road. Had Lola instructed right or left? No matter where I went, I was perpetually getting lost, plagued by my lifelong, terrible sense of direction. I took the left at a phone booth, found another sign, but none that read La Cella. But this must be the way. I walked high up along the ridge alongside clouds so white and perfect, the word that came to me was newborn. Not a single car passed by me. Newborn. The Tuscan Valley and sky were mine. Up ahead, I spotted another Blessed Mother shrine, one of those crooked little buildings with rough stone walls, blotches of mortar, a wooden roof. These crooked little shrines with stone walls and wooden roofs were all over the rural roads, but who tended them? I hadn't passed any actual houses nestled in the hillsides, just the double lines of dirt tire tracks rubbed into weeds, leading to nowhere. But I never saw anyone, so who left the shelves lined with wildflower bouquets in fresh water? I entered. Sun-pierced white roses in tin buckets. Someone had left a rock that read Loretto, where Mary was born. We always thought of where Jesus was born, but what about where Mary was born? Where did she begin? I would have moved into that shrine and made the roses in the glass jars my permanent address if I could have. But the sun would be setting at some point, and I needed to still find La Cella. The road dropped. I had no idea how long I had been walking. I carried no cell phone and wore no watch. At last I spied what looked like a hermitage, a building with rows of windows, and then the La Cella sign. I'd found it. I descended the stone stairs down to the sign, Cella di S. Francesco, prega in silenzio. I passed a few tourists and a pair of Franciscan friars in their brown robes and rope belts swinging. I couldn't help but peek to see, just like the Franciscans at my American church, they wore generic sport sandals on their feet. I passed over another footbridge with a white waterfall cascading down a high, jagged cavern. I could feel how old this place was. The rocks pressed smooth from being under rushing water for over 1,000 years. Green willows blew so gently, the fronds lifting and sighing with the breezes, their tips swirling in the cool, gliding water. I followed more signs, then entered the stone, cold building. April shadows enveloped me. What was it like for St. Francis in the bitterness of December? How did he endure it? Voices of tourists echoed from other bridges. Cella di S. Francesco. I entered his windowless stone room to the fragrance of huge peonies, their sweetness overflowing in a jar. His image hung, a pale, ghostly face, and his hand open, a halo all around him. His bed, 2 skinny wooden planks, his pillow, a split log. How did he rest and dream in such an austere cell? And yet, I felt a presence of beauty in there. The sun was falling. I didn't want to leave. I slowly crossed the footbridge back over the brook, photographing the water gushing over Umber Rock. I ascended the zigzagging stairways and gravel paths to go home. But where was home? Wherever it was, in Cortona or Connecticut, I had to return to it. Where did I actually dwell? And suddenly, tears came. Not like the tears I'd felt at any point in the last years or days. This gentle weeping washed me with peace as a sun shower came from the ridge. The sun shone, but rain fell on me, slanted drops dampening my hair and shoulders. I sat down on the wall of the garden to let the tears fall and just be in the rain. I've never felt so much peace. Peace, it really does exist. And this is what it feels like. This place where St. Francis once lived and walked. Walking right on this very same path that I am on. Both my tears and the sun shower ended softly, simultaneously. The sun warmed my face. Would there be a rainbow? I didn't want to leave. I never wanted to leave anything I loved. I turned to take one last photograph of his cell, his door, a black rectangle in a wall of gray mortar and tan stone. A bell outside his cell hung silent. The peace stayed inside me the entire journey back, kilometer after kilometer. I pressed my right hand between my breasts. I could breathe deeply anew. I was certain I was sending my body life messages, like Bernie Siegel encouraged me to. Was I fulfilling my promise to Dr. Vignati? From that morning, he told me I had no more cancer in my body, and I said, "How can I ever thank you?" And he said, "Live a good life." Was I living a good life? I had scars, but all the crusty specks of my blood had blown off me. I could feel it there on those mountain ridges. I pulled the elastic out of my bun, and my hair uncoiled and blew all around my face. The red circle of the sun sank through the silhouettes of the branches in the valley. My heart began to beat wildly. I was alone. I felt it come up within me. No one could see me or hear me, and even if they did, so what? They would chalk it up to me just being a crazy American. I shouted, "Thank you!" It felt so good. I was shouting to God, "Thank you! Thank you!" Then, "Grazia! Grazia!" It was delicious. By the time I reached the edge of Cortona, cypress trees rose like black flames guarding the ancient Etruscan walls. The scent of bread wafted as dogs barked and the air cooled. I stopped to check to see if my photos came out. I flicked through the images. Prega in silencio. Green willows dragging their tips. And then, right in the center of Francis's open door, my camera captured a tiny light, a flame. Had there been a candle I had not noticed right where he had once laid down his head? He was still there, glowing in the dark.
Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous deeds. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous deeds. Sing a new song to the Lord, who has worked wonders, whose right hand and holy arm have brought salvation. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous deeds. The Lord has made known salvation, has shown justice to the nations, has remembered truth and love for the house of Israel. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous deeds. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Shout to the Lord, all the earth. Bring out your joy. stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, or hear the angel voices, O night divine, O night when Christ was born. O night, O holy night, O night divine.
Fall on your knees. Today is the first day of summer. My annual cancer test is tomorrow. I need to up the ante here at home with my connection to God. I put a fresh tea light in my Our Lady of Guadalupe candle. I lie down for a few moments to just let her comfort me and stare at the flicker and glow. I sip my morning espresso outside later and wait to see if the fresh sugar water I put in the red plastic hummingbird feeder on the shed will call to the pair of hummingbirds. They've returned for so many summers now, flying hundreds of miles. Will they find their way back? Later, upstairs, I know I'll get more relief from my anxiety if I get on my knees. I make my bed extra neat to avoid it for a bit longer. These flashes of pride, this inner critic invading me saying, "Why are you such a foolish sap? Falling on your knees makes no difference. It's just childish nonsense." I take more time than usual to fold the flat sheet back over the down comforter in a perfect parallel line. Then I lean on the mattress with my hands wide open, lower to my elbows, and let myself kneel. I put my hands into prayer position and I whisper, "Stay with me." But these words don't feel right. I rethink it, like deleting a line when I write. In the last months, this has shifted. My relationship with God has become new. I say, wait, no. I know you are always with me. Help me stay with you. Despite it being the solstice, the longest day of the year, the Christmas carol, "O Holy Night," comes to me. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angels' voices. In my life, I've had my share of both depression during the relentless holidays and also tender, unexpected epiphanies. Now, as I stand up in my bedroom, Feeling that connection, I sought. I think of the words to the next stanza of the song. And he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. I get it now. My newfound belief that Jesus came to find me, that it only makes sense that I too am a sheep he climbed a mountain to find, has touched this place of worth at last. It's just like the shepherd Doug described. He knows where everyone is. He knows where I am. I feel myself in the secure circle of Psalm 23, an uninterrupted, uncluttered connection to Christ, a direct, sweet dyad, an enclosure. At long last, this psalm, this carol is true for me. He appeared. I feel my soul's worth. I'm so grateful for where the Psalms have led me. I don't need to try to separate out seasons into compartments. On the first day of summer, thrumming with the magic of Christmas morning, after a long, long eve, I hear that familiar sound of the tiny, buzzing hummingbird wings. This chapter is called Psalm 23. It takes place at a place called Haywire. There's a couple people here from Haywire. I'm not going to call them out. They know who they are. I'm very blessed to have a beautiful spot to go to with animals. Very Franciscan in nature and energy. Psalm 23. I have a place in my life that's like the setting of Psalm 23. Haywire Farm, 30 minutes north of me, almost to Massachusetts, has a modest gray house and emerald green barn at the top of the hill. The 6-acre slope of land has 3 large fenced paddocks, one behind the barn where the 5 horses mostly graze, another one where they practice jumping, and a third closer to Case Street, overgrown with clovers and daisies. It's a place of refuge. Amy, the woman who created this farm, has set a goal of making this a sanctuary with an open-door policy where any person seeking the healing beauty of horses is welcome. I think of Psalm 23 when I look over the land. I always feel watched over here, she says. I don't know how or why, but it melts my fears to watch the horses' changing silhouettes. Because my bones break so easily, I don't risk riding them, but I don't have to. They delight me with their hilarious side eyes and eye rolls, the way the gorgeous thoroughbred pony Timmy says he loves me by blowing hard through his velvet muzzle and deliberately fogging up my glasses. The transformations that occur are striking. There's the 17-year-old girl who, after a meltdown at school during a fire drill, refused to go back and only returned to school once she began riding at Haywire. A 55-year-old man who suffered with painful physical disabilities his whole life, including pain in both hips because one of his legs is shorter than the other, comes every week. Amy tells me how in 20 years of knowing him, she never saw him smile until he started to ride. He smiles all the time now and says he made 3 good decisions in his life: to get sober, to get married, and to ride at Haywire. It's my church, he says. On any given Sunday, the little girls run past the wilted rhubarb in their cool cowboy boots, joyfully wanting to give Tonka and Levi carrots. You would not know these kids were labeled ADHD, depression, defiance, social anxiety. There's a 16-year-old girl named Grace who has become a fixture at Haywire. She had once been a truant. I asked if she could tell me about her connection to the farm, but first I read her Psalm 23. She laughs, her head a crown of long rowan braids lightly blowing, and her brown eyes very wise for someone others would refer to as a kid. She nods. It's a safe space, and oh, you got the green pastures right on. You've got plenty of shepherds with Amy and the horses here. Even sweeping the barn is an escape. It's a piece of heaven touching the clouds. I bet in the morning you can touch them. Her description is lovely. So, I ask her, how did you end up here? How did you find this place? Grace's eyes grow serious. I ran away in January. I was looking for an escape. I went away for 3 days. I was free. It was snowing and cold. My parents were in the streets of Hartford looking for me. I was in an abandoned apartment. I ran away Friday and woke up in an unused Airbnb with a strange lady standing over me. She asked, "Who are you?" She prayed over me, pleading, "I hope she finds her way home. God, please take care of her. Forgive her. Please keep Grace safe." She told me she had awakened at 4 a.m. with a message inside her head. Check your Airbnb upstairs. And that's how she found me. But I wasn't done running away. I went home and snuck out again that night to get on the bus to Hartford with my friend. A boy who was a troubled kid. His mom was absent. His dad was absent. But his parents weren't looking for him like mine were. My mom had called the police that time. They put posters out for me. I ended up in a freezing place with homeless people walking through the hallways and holes where the doorknob was supposed to be. It was exhilarating and sad. At last, I went back home. My grandma is really good friends with Amy. She was like, "You're going to Haywire." I ended up here in February. Ever since then, I haven't had the urge to run away anywhere. I have this outlet now. If I run away, I can't come here. Why would I run from this? Riding a horse, you become one with it. When I ride, everything turns off and I flow. You're untouched and pure, what you're meant to be. My anger and the turmoil inside me, if it was a dust storm, it's now the last line you try and sweep into the dustpan. Still there, but barely noticeable. I can breathe again. One night when I slept over here, I woke up and came outside, and I was like, I want to lay in the grass and be merged into the earth to feel at peace. So I ask, what would you call it? God? Great Spirit? The divine? She shakes her head in wonder. All I know is there's something out there, and it's not asking for anything, but it wants us to be open to receiving. We sit in a profound silence for a long time. I think of how God never asked me for anything, just wanted to give. I have learned to receive. Grace stands up and heads into the barn. A few moments later, she comes out, leading the enormous Rex, and she hops on him bareback. They looked perfect together. Grace circles the outside of the paddock, and I think of all the people who love her so deeply, who searched for her when she was lost. The logo for Haywire Farm, when you turn into the driveway at the mailbox, is made of a round oval with barbed wire twining around. In the center, untouched by any pain, a graceful, simple-lined horse leaps wide in teal and green. All of us go to Haywire. or to church, or to the ocean, or to the Psalms, to find that spirit within, to find again the one within us who runs free.
Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into my shepherd, so nothing shall I want. I rest in the meadows of faithfulness and love. I walk by the quiet waters of peace. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Gently you'll raise me and heal my weary soul. You'll lead me by pathways of righteousness and truth. My spirit shall sing the music of your name. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Though I should wander the valley of death, I fear no evil, for you are at my side. Your rod and your staff, my comfort and my hope. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. You have set me my fears, from death into life. Surely your kindness and mercy follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of my God forevermore. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life.
The place where the light enters you. Today, the sun is aimed at a rare angle on the western horizon, shooting all the way through the narrow window, across my dining room, into the galley kitchen, and landing on the counter with the wide, flat bowls on top of the microwave. The bowls are empty, no bread and ripening fruit, but the bowls are overflowing with light. The sun only finds that corner for a few days of the entire year, and for a few minutes in these days. That's it. I want to pay attention so much to this life that when the elusive light comes to my ordinary home, I stop and dip myself in it. Just as the poet Rumi declares, the wound is the place where the light enters you. During those 2 years of pain and the 17 holes in my body, I hung on to that idea of light getting inside me. This changed me permanently into a devotee of light. In the time it took to write this down and describe it, the corner of the kitchen is gray again. The bowls hold shadows. Nothing lasts except the desire for a love everlasting, for love everlasting, for everlasting love. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
We thank you, Maureen, for an inspiring reading from your book this evening. Your words fully explored the Advent journey from darkness to light and how that light transforms lives. We also thank Gabe and Zach, who have graced our evening of reflection with their gift of music. And we thank Madison for her live stream ministry. And we thank you for joining us. Please have a peaceful evening and a blessed third week of Advent. Good night.